Welcome, folks, to the latest episode of the Vernon Richard Show. And today we're talking about continuous all the things, delivery, deployment. You'll realize at the start of the show that we don't even know necessarily what these things mean. So we have a bit of a discussion about that. But yeah, it was triggered by something that I'm looking at work. And then Rich wanted to take it a little bit more general. And then we just, got into it. And then, we had to call it at the end because we could have been here all night talking about this. It was really good.
It's buzzword bingo galore. And yeah, lots of interesting thoughts around how you operate or how testing operates or quality works in some of these continuous worlds. So yeah, enjoy.
And be sure to check out the show notes because I'm going to try and find as many resources to call material on these topics as I possibly can. So yeah, enjoy the episode.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Vernon Richard Show. Richard Show. Yay, woo! Right. How are you? He's got tester on. You should get a tester from Leicester, custom made.
We need some merch, bro. We need some merch. I really want some merch. We've got to sort out a logo.
Logo and merch. I like it. Good show.
Logo and merch. Because as you probably may be aware, Stuart Day is a very good friend of mine. Stuart and Chris have a podcast called Quality Talks, and they've got awesome merch and logos.
Yeah.
But we didn't bother. We're building up to it.
Yeah. We said don't let Richard get carried away and spend 2 weeks designing a logo.
Well, that
actually
is a true
record
story.
Some content is what actually happened.
Yeah.
And we said let's get it established and go in first. And once we've got an audience, which reminder, please subscribe if you're not subscribed, or on YouTube especially. Please subscribe to help us get up to the point.
Subscribe everywhere. Just wherever you're listening or watching, please subscribe. It really helps us out a lot. We appreciate it.
So yeah, no, we do. Once I've got a few things to do, and then I'll have a look at a logo, and we'll get some merch and some ideas out there. Got any ideas for merch? Let us know. Or if you want to design a logo, let us know.
With this. I got this from Agile testing days last year.
Right, so
I got this from Johnny Jones as well. He's an absolute legend.
Yes, Johnny Jones, photographer extraordinaire. Right, so you had an inkling of an idea, and like semi-related to an aspect of your role and work, and we thought let's just discuss it as a broader topic instead, which is how does testing differ, or how does it look, or how does the person doing that testing differ? Is that the right words? Differ, alter, what skills do you need to bring?
The way I would put it is, if you're going to have a tester on a team that is using continuous delivery, maybe deployment, and we might argue about what that means. At some point, we'll debate it.
Where's Abby when you need her?
Yeah. If you have a tester in a team and that team is using continuous delivery to build and release their products and their application, what skills and behaviors does that tester need to have to succeed? And then Rich wanted to have a wider conversation around what does testing look like in a team that is using continuous delivery and or deployment. So, and quick tangent, if I look hideously distracted, it's because Liverpool are playing. So if you're watching this and I keep looking to my left, it's because that's where the screen is with the game on. Sorry for the non-football fans. That's all the football that's going to occur unless Liverpool score. Or
Fair
maybe
enough.
If Villa score, then Rich might talk about football. But
maybe, yeah. Especially if Rashford scores. Right, so how do we start this? So, let's think. So, maybe let's get
compare and contrast.
I think so, yeah. Let's just start with the obvious, though. Let's just get agreement on these words, right? So, continuous delivery is always...
What that means?
Well, in my mind, it's always having ready shippable code. So, your code should always be shippable. continuous deployment is automatically deploying that code as it becomes shippable. So no pressing of the button. That's usually the main difference. Continuous delivery, someone has to press the button. Continuous deployment, it's gone. It's out there. Yeah. It's straight into the wild as soon as the pipeline is happy. So I think that's my initial first starting point when I think about this. It's like, it almost feels like they start at the same point, but you would have to be, your confidence, I don't like the word confidence after listening to Keith Clenn for all these years, but like the word confidence or comfort has to come from somewhere, right? So is the build passing enough to give that team comfort? And do they have to do more before it enters that automatic pipeline in a continuous deployment space? Or that kind of defeats the point, right? Because if your code's always continuously, if your code is ready to be shipped, it should be ready to be shipped. So the only difference is that you just let it go or you click a button. So the level of comfort should be the same, right? You would want the same level of
I think at the point where, I think that I would say at the point where it's deemed to be shippable, and then in the continuous deployment context, it is deployed.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of, I don't think that's where. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's where the interesting stuff happens. It's probably, well, what do we need to do in order for this thing to be shippable, and what do we need to do in order to merge? And once it succeeds, it's gone into whichever environments.
Well, I was trying to compare and contrast the two, as in, like, the only thing that's not happening is someone is not clicking the button, and that gets me thinking that there's a conversation taking place in a continuous delivery environment to agree whether we click that button or not. So
who is having that conversation, do you think?
I'm guessing that's a conversation on, like, is the feature ready? Like, is it behind a feature flag? Again, you start thinking feature flags. Is the feature ready? Is there tests already in place? Have we mitigated the risks that exist? Is support ready for this feature to go out there? Like, I can think of all sorts of questions, but are they, like, should they be happening then, or should they have already happened?
I feel like they should have already happened.
Yeah.
Well, what? But you're right. Like, what is the benefit of not shipping at that point when you have something shippable? I actually don't know the answer. I feel like I should know the answer to that. I don't know. I don't have a convincing answer for that.
I think it opens up so many, like, I don't know, like, not tangents, but so many different avenues. Like, you think about the code itself, right? So even if you don't think about testing, the code itself, it always needs to be, as I said, deployable, right? So if you're building a feature that's not ready, it's got to be behind a feature flag. It can't alter data or a DB or a table that might alter something else.
What do you mean by not ready?
So a lot of the times,
to add another potential argument / discussion point, you've got deployed and released.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, if it's deployed, it's in production. And if it's released, it's also usable by some customer or another. And if it's behind a feature flag, it's not released, but it is deployed.
Okay, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So release for you is kind of turned on, turned off, but it could be, it could be released for a subset of people. Okay, yeah. I was thinking even before that, though, of just the quality, not the code, but the completion of features, like, because when it's more again, I don't know if it changes too much, but if you're just pushing it straight out there, it almost feels like there's got to be a lot of thought to how that code gets ran or triggered, or the databases don't end up being updated when they're not ready to be updated, or tables are migrated when that's not ready. But again, that doesn't stop that problem in the continuous delivery.
That's already, that's in order for it to be shippable, by definition, that has already been taken care of. It's like, that is fine. We have built this thing And we have, well, maybe this is part of the discussion. We have thought about what risks we're interested in and which ones we're not, and we've mitigated for those risks with some kind of test.
Yeah.
Maybe you might want to start differentiating between a test and a check at this point. But I'm just going to use the word test and assume everybody knows what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you may have, so you've implemented these tests. Whether that's a machine or a human, medium, like, and you said, right, this is ready. We are good. We have made sure that the database migration has succeeded and hasn't trashed the whole situation. We have made sure that data is in the right place and in the right shape. We've made sure that this particular user in this particular organization can still do the same things they were able to do. On the version that we're replacing, it's going. We've got whatever level test, and predominantly talking about automated tests here, right? You're talking about unit, you're talking about integration, you're talking about system level. We've got all of that in place. We are comfortable that this thing is shippable, or we're comfortable that we're just going to send this thing and deploy immediately, or we are also comfortable that it's going to be immediately available to, somewhere between 1 and 100% of our customer base.
Okay. So you mentioned the word risk, so now I'm thinking again of the difference. So if we're in a continuous deployment, then it actually, when we talk about testing, I think it's now more of testing your system when it's in a deploying state. There was a large bank, I believe, that has this would apply to whenever you click the button or not, right? But as that button process gets triggered, part of their pipeline, step 2 or 3 or something, was to take the security down. And then 3, 4, 5, 6 would deploy stuff, and then 7 would put the security back again. And someone somehow noticed this. And basically did some damage.
And had
a
very nice time.
Yeah. So now I'm thinking of like, if you can deploy at any point. So sometimes if I think of being in a continuous delivery team, you might choose, 2 a.m., right? 4 a.m. or when there's only a handful of users on the system.
No,
because you don't know.
What did you say? Because it's delivery, did you say?
Yeah, delivery.
Right, okay.
Because we know that there's a fewer customers, and but we're doing that because we don't perhaps fully understand what might happen if a customer is halfway through a flow, or they're in this certain state if we go and clear caches and reset, whatever, update tables. So I think that's one of the things when we think, you mentioned testing, like I would want to spend a lot more time testing the app as deployments are happening if I was in a continuous deployment team. Not that it's not important in continuous delivery, it is, but I would be a lot more concerned and want to mitigate the risks that if we're deploying 10 times a day, I would definitely want to be knowing what oddities happen in the system, which then brings monitoring to play and observability.
I was going to say, point of it is you have the right tooling in place and you've used it appropriately, so that the way you talk about it, it makes me feel like people wouldn't necessarily be worrying about that issue as much as it sounded like you were saying. So put it this way, right? So it's continuous deployment. So that means when that pipeline goes green, it's gone to production, right? It might go to a test environment as well, but it's definitely going to production, right? But what's happened before that point, and what happens after that point? And what I've seen and heard people talk about is the developer is responsible for making sure that whatever it is that they are implementing is shippable. So they may actually do what you and I might call exploratory testing in their own local environment, perhaps. Maybe they won't, maybe they'll... Maybe they wouldn't, I don't know. But I'm just saying, anything is possible while that person is in the guts of the code making the changes. They'll have the unit test, they'll have the integration test, they'll do the exploit testing, all of that good stuff. They think they're done. It gets reviewed. It passes the review. So that's another quality gate or step, if you like.
Yeah.
Gets through that, and then it will get merged. And at the point where the merge is successful, pipeline's green, it's gone. They would, depending on how comfortable you felt culturally in your organization, maybe that developer would then have a little quick, let me just make sure that this thing is. But it would be a quick one. It wouldn't. I doubt they would be repeating to the same degree the work that they did before they deployed it. But the way you described it, it sounded more like I'm a little bit more worried about this, and I want to be a little bit more careful that this thing is in production in the way that I think it's supposed to be there.
No, so
and monitoring absolutely comes into play.
Yeah, it wasn't so much the feature itself; it was more the state of a deploying app. Like, how does that alter the behavior of the app, and does it cause weird oddities when you're halfway through a flow because the session DB got rewritten or the cache got wiped? Does it then cause the next page to take longer to load? Whereas I might not have to think about those things as much if I'm deploying at 2 a.m. when I know no one's using my system, because I now can click the button. It was that side of it that I was thinking. But you've highlighted two other kind of important things, which again, I think perhaps you mentioned, like, is your team and tech stack ready for continuous deployment? So yes. Monitoring, alerting, all that stuff in place. As you deploy stuff, are you updating
also
that
the cultural stuff as well?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And so those are the two things that I just thought of you were talking, but then you just hit the other third one, which is we went back to the start. We mentioned this conversation. Usually there's a conversation where you also mentioned the word quality gate. So usually there's this conversation, which is almost another quality gate where we say, did you do what you said you were going to do? Have you done it? Have you done it? Are we releasable? Is this team ready? Is that team ready? Whereas I think in a continuous deployment, you would have a lot of those conversations a lot earlier. Let's shift left, right? So let's use more buzzwords. We've got check-in now. Let's add shift left into the mix, right? You would, hopefully those conversations are being done a lot earlier, and you kind of hope, or not hope, but like, because of the culture, you know that things are going to be ready. And once it's deployed, people will be ready to handle that, as opposed to this ongoing conversation, or not ongoing, this quality gate conversation where everyone's checking, are you ready? Are you ready? Has that been done? Has this been done? Has that passed? Has someone written that doc? Like, it's almost like someone's got a checklist, right, that they're ticking off. Well, that's how it's been for me. Are we ready to release? Well, the build's green. Yeah, but are we actually ready, Richard? Like, well, the build's green.
But that's the thing, isn't it? And again, the way I'm talking is deeply unsatisfactory.
Me too. That's why I wanted to talk about it, because there's so many little like nuances to how you could achieve both of these things and how you would operate that without saying this is context A, B, C, D, and E. It's hard to wait.
Yeah, but my thinking is, or my understanding, I've worked in a continuous delivery context for sure, and worked in places where the continuous deployment practices were not uniform. So you had some parts of a business where it was more developed than others. But I thought the point of both of these methodologies was where you literally automate everything. So once you've codified what happens in a peer review, like what does this code need to look like? You codify as much of that as possible and then put it into a tool that would check for those coding standards to some degree and would automate as much of that, second pair of eyes from another human as possible. You still might need it, but I'm sure there are many, many, many teams who feel completely comfortable with, well, we've done the work to extract the goodness out of a peer review situation, to put it into our tool, and we're good. But once it's merged and it's green, we're out of here. We're in production, man. We got users to delight.
I think I'm coming back to the shift left idea. I think, and you mentioned quality gates. I think it is just the reframing of the same quality gates, as you said. Sometimes it's automated. Sometimes the PR becomes almost that release conversation that happens later on.
No-go is now a peer review.
Now it's almost done in like merge PR or don't merge PR, because we know if we merge it, it's gone.
That is it.
Yeah, we're just shifting the conversation the other way.
The ones that you and you and I have been involved in were like, everything is batched up to hell. Yeah. It's like you are releasing everything. Are we sure we've tested all the things I said to this and this? Whereas this should be, a small component or a single feature. Is it good? Yeah, gone.
Or it's turned off or feature flagged or whatever, tech they're using to do that. So we know it doesn't matter if it goes out there, nothing's going to happen because no one can access it unless, it's turned on for you or you're a super user or whatever, whatever restriction you put in place. In a previous role, we used to hide things behind whether you were an admin or not. So if you were a site admin, you could see pretty much these pages. And then, you were able to, have a look at that and no one sees it. But yeah, I think that's it. I think there's just the shift, isn't it? It's the quality gates are just shifting. A lot of the behavior is shifting left. I think the biggest difference in the teams I've been on with these conversations is how we break down a feature and breaking it down into proper small chunks that can be shipped. And again, hiding it behind features, whereas sometimes that conversation isn't as in depth. And then we kind of have it as it goes and, we go on because we know we're not shipping it, right? We don't need to have that fully in depth. Everyone agrees we've broken it down really well because we're going to have 20 PRs until someone says, maybe we should build a release, right? And then someone will decide to build up a release, which obviously is neither continuous delivery or deployment, right? That's another one that we're not bringing into the conversation, but that's another way people work because, again, you don't have to have those conversations so early because the rest of the context isn't continuous delivery or continuous deployment. But in this space, I think it puts a huge emphasis on getting those tickets smaller, reducing the risk, allowing you then to mitigate that risk with ease or easier, and ideally in a mostly automated way. But obviously you can't automate something without knowledge, right? We both know that, right? So someone still has to execute stuff locally. So yeah, I don't feel like my brain's like twisted in knots because it doesn't feel that different, but it is. But it's hard to explain.
I think what I've always thought about this is that, and this is, how long have we been talking for? Coming up for half an hour. It's now time to invoke the famous Ashby infinity symbol diagram, which I will include in the show notes for sure. And the point is that the testing happens everywhere, or at least the way I describe it is the testing skills can be used everywhere. That they can add value throughout that process. Yeah. What I've been saying to people is, I do not, like, Gordon Ramsay does not work in my house. I do not employ a personal chef, and yet cooking still happens in my house. And so similarly, you may not have a a testing specialist or generalist in your team, but the testing will still need to occur. And you know, we were talking about it earlier, right? We're talking about, the go, no-go discussions that we've been a part of earlier on in our career have now morphed into this smaller conversation between a pair of devs about a smaller piece of the context. And it's still there. Some of these things are still occurring, but maybe they look different, or the size and shape of them is different. The testing is still happening. Like, somebody is still thinking to themselves, oh, I'm worried about this thing happening. How can we, manage that, handle that, mitigate that? Oh, we can do these things, that thing, and the other thing.
That's so as I've been listening to you, that's exactly. So you mentioned the infinity model, right? Test here, test there. But then you just mentioned mitigate. And I think that is the key difference here. It almost isn't a testing question. It's a risk management question for me.
Yeah, big time.
And I know, I get it. But some people confuse the two, right? Like, testing is, that's the only way they can think of mitigating the risk. But I think that's the difference here. You mentioned culture. That's a way of mitigating the risk. We've mentioned monitoring and observability. That's a way of mitigating the risk. Breaking your stories down into smaller chunks and making sure they're behind feature flags. None of this is really testing, is it? Like, quotes. But it's all about reducing that risk, which is often what testing definitely helps do, for sure. But testing ain't the only way to do that, and I think that's often overlooked by a lot of our industry.
It could be. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, because we were discussing, offline, we were like, does one of these teams need a tester? And I think that's the interesting thing. It's like they all need risk mitigating. They all need some level of testing. But
so this is the thing, right? So this is the thing. I don't get super. I think people like to say things in order to trigger a response, and I think people say, oh, we don't need testers on a this team, that team, and other team. Sometimes to trigger a response and polarize and annoy the crap out of people. I think to myself, look, you might be right. In your particular situation with your team and this, that, and the other, you don't need a tester. I think the more interesting question to ask, or way to look at it, is to say, what needs to be true in order for that to be true? And then and then it would be, oh, well, the team would need to do this, or we need to have this skill set, and we need to be able to do, this capability, and the culture needs to look like this, and the behaviors need to look like this. And then the question becomes, okay, is our team that? Like, do we have those attributes or not? And if the answer is no, how do we get them? And maybe that's where you need a tester, is to help you acquire some or all of those attributes and skills and behaviors, perspectives, whatever it is, to help you get to the point where you don't need them anymore. It's almost like being a coach or a therapist.
Yeah, I was thinking coach as you were talking. It goes back to
something like this, guide. It's just, hey, I'm just going to come here. I'm just going to help you get good at the thing, and then I'll clear off.
Yep. I've seen similar. There was that test jumper concept with similar thing. Like, if something's like literally an absolute mess or on fire, an expert comes in just to get it under control and then leaves again. It's like, here it's slightly different reframing, as in let's get good practices going, let's get risk management approaches in place, and then you look after them yourself, and I can depart because you're doing your great job on your own now. And if you ever feel like you're not, come and get me again, and I'll come back, and we'll reassess what you're up to. But I think I think that is we talk a lot about context, right? And understanding the context. And I just here, back to that original how does testing differ? I am struggling to find real, if I was there and my main role was to test, how would I test differently in those two
Well,
context.
I have an opinion about that. But before I share that opinion, you only talked about a test jumper, which is I'd forgotten all about that concept. I'm glad you reminded me about that. The way I've been describing it, even at work, so this is going to sound a bit silly, but it makes sense to me. So, if you have seen some of my favorite movies are the Jason Bourne movies, right? So if you haven't seen the Jason Bourne movies, just like imagine the most capable spy, covert, assassin person that you can possibly imagine, and that's Jason Bourne. So I always think to myself, imagine if Jason Bourne was a software tester. That's what I want. Like that person, Jason Bourne, Jane Bourne. If they were a tester, what would they be? You think, wow, that they would be a badass. They'd be able to do this thing and that thing, whatever thing. You could just drop them in a situation, go away for however long, come back, and like the situation is handled. Like it's cool. Whatever problem is going on in that team or problems is like it's handled, and Jason is chilling. So that's the way I think about it is. But that's a it sounds cool, but that and I listen. I have worked with these people, and I could just start reeling off names right now. I do, and also don't want to do that because I don't want to annoy them or embarrass them. But yeah, just trust me, people. These people exist, and they are out there, and they are absolutely ridiculously awesome. And it takes a lot of effort to grow into that person, but it's absolutely like doable.
Yeah.
It just might take a lot of time and deliberate practice and effort. I think, at least that's what I'm hoping to do with my team. To be honest, I'd like to help them move in that direction.
You've said it. Me and you have spoken about entrepreneurship ideas, right? Just not to go into too much of a tangent, but these people do exist, and they have, I refer to it as a tool belt, right? They have X skills and tools in their tool belt, and they're getting to practice it on a regular basis. So I think that is it. When you need to have that deliberate practice to keep those skills like up in, fresh. Like, you might have them in your head, but if you've not used it for a while, it's like us talking about this topic. I've not spoken about these two terms for ages. It's not needed to. But they're in there somewhere, and as we've spoken, like ideas get triggered. But yeah, I think that is like these people do exist, but also sometimes you don't, as you don't need a Jason Bourne, right? You need someone who's got these 8 to 10 solid skills that fit that context perfectly. But then sometimes you got to bring in a Bourne.
So here's okay. We are going kind of tangent city at this point, but I'm going there. There is an entrepreneurial chap called Alex Hormozi. His wife is called Layla Hormozi. They are super duper entrepreneur extraordinaires. As folks who've been listening to the podcast for a while will know, I like listening to the Diary of a CEO podcast. And Alex was on there. And he was talking about this concept, which is absolutely cool. So what he was talking about, just stay with me. I'll land the plane.
Bad analogy.
He was talking about this concept of, you're the founder of a company and you start out and you do all the things. And for one reason or another, maybe you want to step out of your role so you can just take a step back and just be more looking at the system, or you need somebody who's better than you at all the things. It's like, where do you find, whichever one it is, like, where do you find these people? Because you're basically looking for a unicorn, right? And what he said was interesting. He goes, so here's the thing, finding a unicorn can be really, really hard. But what's a little bit easier is you might be able to find a white horse. So that's the white horse part of this equation sorted out. And you might be able to find, it might be a lot easier to find a rhinoceros. So, the horn angle is covered. And, you might be able to capture some fireflies, and now you got all the sparkly goodness. They said if you just it might not be a matter of finding an individual. It might be a matter of finding a collection of individuals who can, demonstrate and provide the skills that you're looking for. So to loop it back to the actual bloody topic is that could be a solution, right? A solution could be, instead of thinking about what individual do I need, who is like, Jason Unicorn Bourne, that rhymed. Maybe it's a matter of saying, well, what skills do we need in this team?
Yeah, that's what you said, yeah.
It's like, well, okay, this person has that skill. Let's get them. Oh, this person has the other skill. Let's get them. And then this person has the other skill. Let's get them. And now we're cool.
Even one step before that, I think, like we said earlier, it's what are the risks and the challenges that we would have adopting one of these? Then underneath that, how do we have the skills to mitigate those kind of things? And then, as you said, you then go on that journey of filling in blanks, because it is, if we think of like what these two approaches that we're discussing are, still they're kind of the forefront leaders, right? The majority of people aren't doing either of these two things. In my experience,
that's facts.
Yeah, we're doing feature branches. We're getting to the point where, we eventually think all the tickets are done, and then someone tags it as version 2.1.
Yeah.
Trims off a build, and that goes into the pipeline, right? That's how a lot of people are working. So I think there is still a lot of learning, and what's the word? Like, this is the irony of what I've just said, but what's the word I want? It's the nuances and the subtleties of those two words. Like when you really analyze them in depth and pick out those little things, I think then it becomes a lot easier to do what we've just said. What are the differences? How's that going to impact your team? What challenges will that bring? Can you do it? And I think that the one you've said is nail on the head. It's culture. Culture and context. Like, I know you could argue culture is part of context, but it's like, some domains I've spoken about this always as an example. There is some domains you cannot do continuous deployment in. Like, it is just, the risk is just too high. People could die. Money could, not money, but money, trillions, billions of dollars could go away at any moment.
You could shift.
Yeah, exactly. And that is incredibly high risk, and so high risk that it becomes really hard to mitigate it in a continuous deployment context. It shouldn't be, but because the same work still needs to be done, but it's a lot harder to do some of that work in a deployment. You're gonna have to do docs all the time. You have to be filling all these, paper trails and all this other stuff that might exist, which you can't be doing every PR, right? It just doesn't make sense. You would never get anything done. So
I've worked in places where that was one of the big challenges, where we're trying to figure out, we're in a safety critical situation.
Yeah.
So something not working could mean actual lives are put at risk for real.
Yeah.
So what do we do in that situation? Because we have obligations on the regulatory side of things. Is there any way that we can automate? Or it's almost like the process, there's this concept of reusing your sawdust. I probably butchered that, but in a continuous delivery or deployment context, there is a lot of information that you are spitting out all the time.
Yeah.
That could be repurposed into documentation that would satisfy a regulator, depending on the context that you're in.
Yep.
People are, in my experience of working in environments like that, people are very uncomfortable with that. Because reasons. I'm not even saying that they're ridiculous or stupid or wrong or whatever. I'm just saying it's hard to convince some people in that context, because lives are at risk, and also they may not have seen that before. So what do you mean we're going to automate the document? No, we're not going to automate what? No humans involved? I can't. No, absolutely not. This is weird. So that even that is kind of a journey. But I remember. Oh, go on.
Oh, I was going to say my favorite auditing conversation I've always heard is like how test cases became like a de facto thing if you were being audited to have them, right, and mark them as pass and failed, because that apparently proves that testing took place. But then having the recording of the automated tests, literally showing the application being clicked and filled in, was not acceptable. And it's like that's hard evidence. This is the fact that someone ticked a box.
Yeah.
Mad, absolutely mad. But anyway, let's not get into it. We need to bring James Christie in for an auditing rant if we're going to do that.
Man, listen, people, if you are
Yeah.
not consuming James Christie's content, please, please, please do yourself a favor and fix that, because he is the go-to software development, software testing, auditing overlap guy. Like, it's just very good. I was gonna jump back to a question that you asked earlier about, how did she put it? You're talking about testers in that, like, what do they do differently?
Yeah.
And my answer to that is typically, and even this is wrong, but typically all the testing goes through the tester, right? That's what we're used to seeing. In these kind of contexts, I don't think that is going to work because it doesn't scale. Because if if we're constantly, producing shippable code and shipping it, and there is, however many, 1 to 10 humans, but there's 10 times that number generating code, that doesn't scale. So, you're almost like a testing ringmaster, a quality kind of orchestrator. The way I see it is, in that conversation when you're refining things, you're thinking to yourself, your contribution is what we talked about earlier, which is, hey, I think there's this kind of risk with this thing that we're building. How are we collectively going to handle that situation? Like, how are we going to deal with that? So sometimes that would be, hey, Rich, you're going to be implementing this feature. I think we handled that risk with a unit test. Cool. It might be an integration test. You mentioned this earlier. Maybe it's like, actually, we can't test this pre-production. We have to test it in production. So we need some monitoring in place to make sure that this thing is not going to fall on its arse. And and sometimes you don't even so sometimes you wouldn't even need to fix it as the tester. You just need to trigger the conversation and then just let the team do their thing. Sometimes that could be enough.
Absolutely. I'm laughing because I'm thinking of because what you just mentioned there about it doesn't scale, right? But I've just remembered some of the things I've seen because, like I said, I don't know why I'm warming up as we continue to talk. But the whole shift left concept, right? So even in a continuous deployment or delivery phase, I've seen a lot of the work that should be done shift left, on the point where you then end up with branches that people are deploying and testing and trying to do all the stuff you would do, on a release, right? They're doing it on a PR, and it's that PR is being assigned to another person now. That branch is being tested. So nothing's entered the continuous pipelines yet because we've shifted it all over here. Yet they're still pretending. But they're still pretending though that they're a continuous deployment or continuous delivery team. And then I was trying to remember someone's name, and then I can't remember his surname, but Thierry Depau, right? When he talks about, I should get his name correct. Sorry, trunk-based Thierry Depau, right? Because that got me thinking again of that angle, right? You mentioned culture again. How you manage your code, is it trunk-based? Is it branched? It all starts to be like I think in his world, a true continuous deployment or delivery would be trunk-based, mono repo.
All on main, yep.
And again, there's all these little nuances and technical things that, they change it all. We've not mentioned, and we're coming up to time. We've not mentioned rolling back. We spoke about that offline, right? How easy can you roll back? Can you automatically roll back? Can you fix forward? Which one's better in your context?
This is what we talked about. So this is what I was. Because I was saying, in the teams that I've worked on, the way that I think about rolling back, rolling back is I don't know. So outside of a continuous deployment context, you would be rolling back. You'd be like, we've put version 2 out and it's trash.
Because you
We
can't
need to
ship
go
quick
back.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to go back to 1. In a continuous deployment, it's just we can deploy anything that we like at any time. So it's I mean, it is rolling back, but it's almost like, okay, the thing that we just deployed is broken. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Are we going to deploy the next thing that's better, or are we just going to deploy the old thing? But it's not. It's almost like you destroy the environment and then rebuild it back up. So because you're destroying it, it kind of doesn't matter. Destroying, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. But I think it goes back to how testing would be different. And again, it's a lot of testers love doing, triage, investigations, root cause analysis, right? But almost in that delivery.
On a post I heard said he loves that shit.
I do, exactly, yeah. But I love I'm thinking here, like, talking about different skill sets here, you've got to do it quickly, because the decision is, the sooner you find it out, you can then decide whether we can fix forward. If that takes too long, you have to roll back. Like, if it's literally down and on fire, those are your two options. And that then becomes a way of how can you, back to what we said around wider tech, observability, monitoring, screens, dashboards, all this information that's floating around, how can you get it in a digestible way that would allow you to quickly make a call on, you know what, it's clearly that's the obvious fix. Let's get to work. It'll be deployed in 10 minutes. Or I cannot work out what the problem is. We need to roll back now. And you would almost want both options in place, because it gives you options. Right. Funny enough. But you would almost want them in place, because that is going to help you. And I think that's another aspect, again, of that. But then more fun things, right? Have you got access to production? Can you look at the code? Are you a tester that's not allowed to look at this stuff? Again, culture, context, like a lot.
Keys.
Yeah,
Access
exactly.
to levers.
And then another thing that came to my mind, as I said, I'm warming up at the worst possible time. But like, even if you've got continuous deployment in place, that doesn't mean that it's one big bang deployment. It could be an automatic phase deployment. It could take down, EU. Well, you could like pick certain clusters of machines to do first, and then the monitoring, you keep an eye on it. And if that monitoring's happy, phase 2 of the deployment starts. It's still continuous, as in it's gone out, but it's doing like that process is in a phased manner and controlled manner of a mitigating risk manner, as opposed to thinking of having more humans in the loop. It is itself going, let's deploy servers 1 and 2. Let's make sure the monitoring for 1 and 2 doesn't die. Let's automatically put a handful of customers on servers 1 and 2. That's a lot of the site reliability engineering stuff, right? And obviously, can't have DevOps teams, right? But not all the stuff that comes in that space. Like, there's so much you can do, but it all bottles down to what we said, that risk management. Those complex pipelines are a way of mitigating risk. All the different testing we've discussed, shifting left or right, mitigating risk, the way you manage your code, chunk-based or, feature branches or whatever. Like, it is all cultural and risk management and opinions and the joys of people, right? So let's end it with it's always a people problem, and that's the end
always
of
a people problem. Keith Klein is somewhere ringing his Jerry Weinberg bell somewhere, because we've said it's always a people problem. That is the Jerryism. God bless him.
But I do have a positive to end on, though, and I think you hit the nail on the head earlier as well. Like, again, it's just part of the context, and I think anyone can thrive in this space if I think you take a more is modern the right word, but a more modern approach to quality and testing and risk management, right? If you have that mindset, you will find ways of contributing and adding value to any of these areas. If you go in it with that traditional mindset of I'm the gatekeeper, I have to see everything, all this needs to happen, and I say this needs to happen, it just doesn't work in contexts that want to work this way. That doesn't work. As you say, it doesn't scale. It doesn't work. You can't have that mindset. It's not. You've got to allow other people to test and allow other people to mitigate risk, and it's got to be a team effort.
I'm going to be going back because I am just deeply dissatisfied with my answers and thought process for some of these things. So I think I'll be going back into my, RST toolkit, my modern testing / modern development principles toolkit, my trunk-based development reading. Like I'm going to go back in all these materials, and reacquaint myself properly with these paradigms and these ways of working, because I need to figure it out for work anyway. Right?
Yeah. Well,
So
another word we've not hit on fully is quality as well. Not to do that now, but again, it's what is good enough look like, what's quality look like throughout the whole step. So risk, quality, teamwork.
Well, this is another conversation that I was having with some folks at work. It's like, okay, in order for us to decide what testing to do, we need to figure out what it is that we care about. And risk and quality are two sides of the same coin, I reckon. If there's a risk that you're worried about, you can figure out what is the quality that you're interested in. Or if there's a quality that you're interested in, you can figure out, okay, what are the threats to that quality? So I think it's easy to go from one to the other, or straightforward might be a better word. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I struggle when someone says there's a risk, the quality metric is usually there. They just perhaps haven't fully noticed it. Like to say that that's a risk, you must have something in your head that
That's
says
what I mean.
that's not. Yeah, but like I think
you want to protect.
Exactly, and I think some people mention risks without clearly mentioning the quality characteristic they're referring to. Which is, it's hard to do, but frustrating.
It's a very human thing to do, and also,
yeah, absolutely,
it's another thing that you have to deliberately practice. That added in that step of, well, a risk to what, and what makes that important, and important to who, and for what reason. All of that stuff is you got to apply the brakes and just go, whoa, what's going on here? And that's a big conversation, and it can't. I don't think it's as effective to have somebody just come in and tell you what that stuff is. You actually have to effectively work together as a team and an organization to figure out and discuss and debate what that stuff is, and then you can. It's like me coming and saying, "Oh, you should care about this, and this." And I don't have all the context at that time. I don't think that's useful. But bloody hell, we're threatening to double the length of this bloody podcast now.
We started late, but anyway, last thing I'm going to say, definitely my last thing is, I'm laughing again because the quality. You mentioned the word quality, but I'm now warming up. But it's it's almost like the distinction between testing and quality engineering is like, I feel like the conversation, if we carried on, would go down that path of how quality engineering is not testing and testing is not necessarily quality engineering, right? And those skill sets you mentioned and those tool belts and the things that you're doing look different when you're trying to instill quality or conversations around quality into other people and getting them discussing that, which then may lead to them doing their own testing. Whereas traditionally it's like, no, I just test. I need to test everything. That's my goal, because the measure of quality is my opinion. Like, as in, if I am the measure of quality, if I say it's shippable, it's shippable.
I am the law.
Yeah. Whereas nowadays it's more about getting the team to discuss that and agree what that is and work towards that as a team. But we're repeating the same things, but little nuances are coming to me now that I mentioned.
Yeah, true.
Nuances. So
that is true. It is. What I worry about is that people hear that and think that you won't necessarily have an opinion as a tester, and it's no, that's not.
No.
I'll have an opinion. So if you're struggling, I will have an opinion about what we should do. But really, if possible, if the context allows, we should figure that out collectively. Yeah. That's what I think. But anyway,
It's that seat on the table. It's that culture. It's that. Yeah, it's easier to share your opinion in a team that almost talking about quality more. But yes, Zip. we'd love to hear your thoughts, right? We weren't sure what topic to pick. We picked it because we thought we would end up rambling and it might open our minds to other things, which is done. So
it's something on my mind because I'm thinking about
and that's
work.
what we wanted to do. So
I'm going to be bringing a lot of work topics to this podcast. I hope I don't get fired. But yeah, I'm going to bring a lot of work topics to this podcast because they're interesting topics. Try to do a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah. If you thought about these topics and you've got opinions, share below, DM us, whatever you want to do. But we'd love to hear your insights and thoughts on this topic. And yeah, as we've said, please subscribe, share. We're doing really well with our views and things, and we want to keep improving and growing what we're able to do. So yeah, thank you all for listening.
Subscribe, share the link with your family, your friends, your teammates. Tell them that the Vernon Richard Show is where you can get all your quality-related goodness in one place.
All right. Goodbye from me.
Bye from me. Oh, by the way, it was 2-2. Goodbye.